Insights. This is a first of a series of 7 presentations that I'll be giving. And before I get started, I really want to thank Naren and everyone over at Equa Marketing, Haley, Christan, who helped set this up. I think this will be a powerful experience. I'll share some insights that I've learned, mostly from the School of Hard Knocks. Today we'll start with accountability, but these all stack upon one another. And I call them secrets for a reason, not because they're to be hidden, but because they're not a part of typical dental conversations. But when I speak with dentists who are struggling, usually one or more of these 7, a lack thereof of one of these 7 is really at the root of what's tripping them up, why they're struggling, why they feel ineffective. Sometimes it's a compound effect. So today's specific topic is on accountability, and that manifests in lots of different forms. Seems to be harder to come by, not only as a leader, but to get that from your team. But we'll talk a little bit more about ways to do that or ways to think about that so that you're feeling as powerful as possible as a dentist. And that's really my main objective, is to get dentists feeling powerful and in control, because if we can get them there, then they can serve their patients in a way that they've always dreamed. And when I talk to the dentists, the other common theme that I typically see is people who are hardworking and kind-hearted, and they really want to serve, but sometimes they serve at the sacrifice for their own mental well-being, their own physical well-being. They let stresses of dental practice take their toll, and there's just a better way. Like I said, I had to learn it from the School of Hard Knocks, but I'm happy to share where I've struggled and where the insights I've gained. It's taken me several decades to figure all this out, but now I have a formula that I think predictably gets me and dentists that I serve, that I speak to from stage, that I coach, a way of thinking, a mindset and a skill set that allows them to have their best year every year. So today, again, we'll dive into accountability. And on the spirit of accountability, I've been really slammed lately, and I was really slow at getting out some of the promotion and marketing stuff. So I regret that there are not more people on the call, but we'll record it and hopefully compound the effect of this as time goes on, as we move on to the other 7 episodes that'll extend clear into May. So we'll be doing that monthly, and at the end, I'll share the schedule with you of how that'll all break down. But before I get into that, I think I have to share a backstory with you, some things that really help people understand why this message has become an obsession for me. And I call it the dream and the nightmare. So I grew up in rural Nebraska, a farm kid, went to undergrad in Nebraska, dental school in Nebraska. So kind of a sheltered life. But I went to the dental school on an Army Health Professions scholarship program, and they paid for my dental school, and I'm grateful for that. It allowed me to stay out of the red, but it also allowed me the opportunity to start traveling the world. I did a residency in Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and I also served in Germany and Italy. And so kind of hostile times, the deployment rate was really fast and furious, soldiers going off to Iraq and Afghanistan all the time. And so it really gave me an understanding of what true dedication and sacrifice was. The other thing it exposed me to was the European lifestyle. I grew up in kind of a hardworking, dusk till dawn. The work is never quite done, therefore you're never really taking significant time off, that sort of lifestyle in Nebraska. And Germany, but especially Italy, really taught me how to celebrate life. Long Italian meals with carafes of wine, 2 to 3 hours. There's no dinner and a movie there. You just sit down for dinner and have a good time and good conversation. And so they don't need an anniversary or a birthday or a special event to really have a good time, and I appreciated that. So when I left the Army, I was an associate ship in Charlotte, and it was almost, well, I would say we had worse culture shock coming back to the United States than when we went to Europe, believe it or not. And we ended up back in the rat race, started accumulating all the trappings of success, the nice house, the dog, the white picket fence, 3 cars, a little embarrassed to say that we were just thinking we could buy our joy, and soon to find out that we both had good jobs. We both had kind of the picture perfect life, Kara, my wife, and I, but it never felt like home. And so we started looking around, and we finally stumbled upon this location here that you'll see in this picture, which is Avon, Colorado. My practice is down in the bottom left-hand corner, right over here. And the second I found Vail and Beaver Creek and Avon, it reminded me so much of the European lifestyle. And so I moved to Colorado to pursue a lifestyle. And I call this slide the dream and the nightmare for a reason. One is that I didn't necessarily set myself up for success. It was a bad economic time. It was 2009. They didn't need a dentist. The cost of living there was really high. We had a hard time selling our house back in North Carolina. We had deadbeat tenants that were making the rent. So now I was paying a mortgage and a rent in Colorado. Things in the practice didn't take off as fast as they could. I had team members with horrible attitudes. My wife was pregnant. Like every single challenge that you could have in life was just compounding on me, financial, emotional, physical. And I was probably a little bit overconfident, quite frankly, that I could take this thing and grow it fast because I knew that I had a work ethic that could drive that, but I lacked strategy. And so I really struggled for quite a bit. I learned marketing and made the phone ring. And so it was slowly growing over time. And things were really starting to take off in 2012, 2013. But things were still tight financially. And then suddenly in 2013, I walk into my office and found my wife face down on her laptop computer. She had had a stroke. So those moments make you really appreciate what's important in life. But it can be difficult for the alpha male who has a 3-year-old in preschool, figuring out how do you make it all work. The first couple nights after Kara's stroke were really touch and go. She had swelling in the brain. They put 2 stents in her neck to save her life. And she recovered actually quite quickly after the first 48 hours, which were really challenging. But all that to say, I did not. I was a shell of myself. The financial challenges, the emotional challenges, the worrying if my son was going to have a mother long term, if she was going to have another stroke, really started to take their toll. And it put me in a pit for a long time. So I had moved to Vail and Avon to live out this dream, and it had become anything but that. But this picture stayed true to me. I remember looking at the crib of my son when he was 1 or 2 and saying, Bennett, I don't know how I'm going to make this happen, but I'll figure it out. And so through all those challenges, having a clear vision, what we'll talk about in the next episode is clarity, is incredibly important, incredibly powerful. And I keep finding dentists who don't really know what they want. They know what they don't want, but they don't know what they want. Therefore, they're trying to hit a target they can't see. That makes things far more challenging than they need to be. But back to this story, the dream and the nightmare. So almost from 2015, probably almost 3 years, I was in this pit where there was not enough money at the end of the month. I was overextended on credit cards. I was debating whether we can afford to take vacations. It was just difficult. I had mutiny among the team. 6 or 7 months after Kara left the hospital, I had 3 team members leave me all in 1 week. And this is the same team members that said, Dr. Maloli, we're with you every step of the way, on a card when Kara was in the hospital. So that takes its toll. Trying to figure it all out. I got to the point where I was barely getting out of bed to make it into the office and be there when the first patient showed up. I stopped going to morning huddles, but yet I locked into that vision, and I knew that if I just persisted, I would eventually find a way. And it was slow going, crawling out of that pit, but all of a sudden I started to find answers, reasons to get out of bed faster. Small habits that I was installing, small limiting beliefs that I was uninstalling, and I started to get momentum. And then in 2016, at Christmas time, I always use that as a time for reflection. I have some time off work typically, and I sat down and I just kind of got angry, and I was like, this isn't how it was supposed to play out. This isn't who I am as a leader. I'm far bigger than this. And I jotted down in 16 different categories exactly what I wanted for my life. And I said, I don't want 2017 to be a good year. I want it to be the best year I ever had. And so some of the strategies I'll be sharing with you in the next 6 episodes, plus this one, are the foundation of that. It's built momentum because I've connected with powerful experts, but that's my motivation. 1 is to get out of the pit. 2, once you're out of the pit, these same strategies kind of light your life on fire, light your practice on fire, light your culture on fire, allow you to have your best month after best month. And I call them secrets because they're not typically talked about in dental circles. And it kind of bugs me because when I bring these up, dentists are like, well, I want bottom line results. I'm like, these are the drivers of bottom line results. If you think you're just going to continue to grow your practice while running yourself into a ground, that strategy will have some traction, but it'll eventually run out. When you burn out, so will your practice. Your team will follow suit. So what I'm looking is for sustainable growth, year after year, things getting a little bit better, a little bit more time off, a little bit more take home, feeling better when I'm going to work, feeling more confident about the quality of care that I'm giving patients. So these strategies will not only get you out of a pit if you're feeling stuck, but it'll light your life and practice on fire if you're feeling like you've already got momentum. But I wanted it to be more than just a theory, something that I believed in. I had put it to the test myself, but I felt like I needed more authority behind the concepts. So a large part of 2017 and 2018 has been me connecting with people who I consider far more advanced, far more developed in the research side, because again, I didn't want it to be just theory. I think dentistry is full of this fluff that has limited application. I wanted something that worked for everybody all the time. So on the left side, you'll see me and Brendon Burchard. Brendon Burchard is considered the world's expert on high performance. High performance is sustained success over the long term without burning bridges, with increasing your well-being, while reducing stress, while increasing your relationships. Ways to compound things so things just get better and better. I became certified high performance coach under him. He's the authority. If your first name is Usher or Oprah, this is the guy you call for coaching, literally. And so I was honored to be able to work with him. The upper right, you'll see John Maxwell, best-selling author, considered the world's expert in leadership. I felt like these two things were missing pieces from my strategy in my life, but I was also seeing it as a missing piece in the equation for dentists who were really stuck in their practices and feeling like they weren't taking home the income that maybe even they were getting when they were associates. The third down on the bottom right, you'll see a picture of Titans of Dentistry. It's a book that was just released a couple weeks ago. 30-some of the top performers in dentistry profiled, because we didn't want to just focus on clinical. We wanted to as the tagline says, I want to know how they perform, how they think differently and act differently, and how that allows them to sustain success. The people we profiled are from a variety of different backgrounds. Some you know well, some you don't know well. There are some common themes, but the one thing that both Justin Short, my co-author, and I believed is that success is a customizable process, meaning what's good for me is probably not good for you. There's some fundamentals that we can learn from one another, but your vision, your clarity, your purpose, you have to define that, and you'll not be happy and you'll not be fulfilled if you are constantly chasing other people's versions and visions of success. That has to be defined by you, and that's really laid out. The reason I'm so excited about those, because it really lit a fire under me and gave the message that I had some fuel, because now it was backed by research, and not just something that I had come up with and work with me. It's something that is duplicatable and something that I'm really excited, if you can't tell, to share with dentists. So why do I call these secrets? One, secrets, this is usually a pretty good marketing term because it builds curiosity, but too often, and it's not the dentist's fault, they don't realize that these are the true drivers of true success. And true success, is about alignment. It's not about toys. It's about purpose. It's about connecting your head and heart and making sure that you're feeling good about the work that you're doing. It's about perpetual growth. It's about service. And those things are driven by these 7 categories. And the problem that I see commonly with dentists is you introduce these things to them and they want to be transformational in all these capacities, right? Bad idea. What you want to do is find little ways to create upward trends and accountability, meaning some level of control, and you're taking the blames for the thing that happened in your practice, whether it happened because of a material failure, a lab failure, a team member failure. Ultimately, it's up to you. You're the owner and you need to own it. Ultimately, that'll set you free, and I'll explain why. Clarity is really understanding exactly what you want, but more importantly, why you want it and who you have to become to get it. Too often dentists worry about how do I get it, because that's usually the strategy on a new procedure. How do I place an implant? What are the materials I need? What are the instruments that I need? But business and life don't work quite the same as clinical procedures, and so it requires a different strategy and a different skill set. We'll talk about that next month. Energy. Dentists are commonly burning out because they're trying to grow their practice while running themselves into the ground. There are strategies that allow you to have more and more energy, therefore more capacity to increase goodwill and case acceptance in your practice, therefore growth year after year. But if you, as the racehorse, are always tired, that is not a model that can be sustained. So taking care of yourself, being selfish so that you can be selfless, is a really important strategy that I'll talk to you more about. Courage. This is a big one because dentists are taught not to take risks. That's kind of our personality, and a lot of the business and life decisions that we make require courage. So are we continually choosing comfort over courage? Or are we able to make these little micro decisions? Are we making them courageous? Are we being decisive? We'll talk about that more in a few months. Productivity. Productivity to dentists typically means, what did I get done during the day? Between all the hygiene checks and all the hygiene revenue and column 1 and column 2, plus the doctor revenue and your columns, what was the top line for that day? Well, I think productivity has to have a much more robust meaning than that. Meaning, not only are you getting a lot of things done, but are you doing the right things? Are you making deposits in the relationships of your team, your family, your friends? Are you taking time for yourself? All that can be engineered to make sure that your life is serving your practice and your practice is serving your life. 6 is influence. Influence for dentists is largely missing because they forget that that's the most important thing. That if you're a strong leader, your practice will grow. If you're strong as a leader, your practice won't grow. John Maxwell calls that the law of the lid. If you want an 8 practice and you're a level 4 leader, it's not something that will likely happen. But influence is also the way that we impact our patients. Are we giving them the level of goodwill? Are we helping them with case acceptance, meaning turning their needs into wants for them so that they're not spending the $200 that they can have on a filling on a night out, only to find out a year later that they have a $2,000 endo buildup and crown? That's influence. And then what do we do with the impact and the influence that we've developed in the community? Are we using that for good? Influence is being a good spouse, a good friend, a good parent. Super powerful strategies. We'll talk about that. And the last one that we'll talk about through this series is necessity. Necessity is essentially creating a system to turn your wants into needs. So your shoulds become musts, because we can all give ourselves a break and find reasons why we shouldn't get out of bed in the morning. But if we let that go over time and our health is in decline, are we going to be able to be at our children's wedding? That's how you convert your shoulds into musts, creating a more compelling why, a bigger driver, more reasons so that you can have more results. And that'll be our final session, which I think is in May. But let's dive into accountability. And these are all driven by some core beliefs I have that I've developed over time. They can be debated, but I don't find many holes in this. They're not, just like any other rules, they're not applicable 100% of the time, but I would say darn near 100% of the time. Let's go through these. Organizations take on the personality of its leader. If the leader is lazy, you'll have a lazy practice. If the leader is driven, you'll have a driven practice. If the leader is angry, you'll probably have an irritable team. Organizations take on the personality of its leader, which goes hand in hand with something we'll talk about, which is leading by example. 2, effective leadership precedes effective team leadership. Effective self-leadership precedes effective team leadership. What does that mean? Self-leadership is usually harder than team leadership, quite frankly. But if you can learn and grow and innovate yourself, if you have powerful disciplines and habits like morning routines, if you show up as a engaged doctor in the doctor-patient relationship at 8 and you're still doing that at 5 p.m., that's showing strong self-leadership. You're showing the discipline. You're showing that you can do what needs to be done no matter what, that you're willing to do whatever it takes. If your team sees that, then it makes it much easier to be an effective team leader. And once you've had an effective team leadership, then you'll have predictable growth over time because there's harmony, people are aligned, they're all rowing in the same direction. This is something that took a long time for me to figure out. Is number 3 is what I call the ultimate dichotomy, because I was taught to be very serving, very giving. It's all I saw from my parents, but sometimes I gave more than I had available, and that's not obviously a sustainable model. So by this, I mean, you have to be selfish in order to serve, meaning you have to take care of yourself. A phrase that I sometimes use is the king eats first, and that's hard for a lot of people to hear, but you can't serve if you're burnt out. You can't serve if you're sick. You can't serve if you're in the hospital. You can't serve if you're struggling with sedation of some sort, whether it be something simple like video games or something much more addictive. Those all can be challenges, and if you're not taking care of yourself and feeling good about who you are, you can't serve effectively. So it's okay to take time and schedule time. In fact, it's almost mandatory to be selfish if you want to deliver at the level in your practice long term that most dentists I talk to desire to. And 4th, growth and service are at the core of a doctor's purpose as well as their practice. I like to see practices growing year after year. That can happen in lots of different ways, but there are always ways to optimize. And the best way to do that is to optimize the leader again and again and again. I like doctors to think of themselves as the number 1 asset, and the practice is the number 2 asset. If you have a number 1 asset, you're continuing to double down on the growth, the development, the education, the skill sets, and the mindsets of that doctor who is you, the listener. So there's 3 strategies I want to talk to you about regarding accountability. Point the thumb is the opposite of pointing the finger, if you haven't figured that out. Point the thumb is a mindset of basically saying everything is my fault. Again, very hard message to hear. Not something that I perfected, not something that I ever think I will perfect, but something that I strive for is to take on all of the blame that happens in the practice. Here's the reason why. If dentists are blaming, say, their location, their community, their team, their patients, whatever, their lab, the economy, their family, you're giving that power to someone else. Therefore, you're at the mercy of that thing. That makes it really hard to control, and it makes it really hard to improve. So accountability taken to the extreme is everything is my fault. So who hired the team member? Who trained the team member or didn't train the team member? Who didn't provide the resources for excellence to make sure that you can develop some form of delegation and autonomy within your team members? Ultimately, that's on the owner, and that's in big organizations and small organizations. So how much, it's the begging question of how much of the success of the practice is up to you. And whatever percentage you say is fine, but the higher that percentage, the more results that you'll be able to get. That's not to say that you have to do all the heavy lifting. Good leaders are always good delegators, but you're delegating to people who are properly trained and properly invested, and finding those people and empowering those people is part of your job. If you want to have a peaceful, easy work day, you'll delegate everything that's not something you enjoy, something that's not a high-level executive decision, or something that requires a dental license. You'll eventually find a way to get that off your plate so that you can do what you do best. There's something that I have on my whiteboard, it's here to my right, that I have to remind myself, but to me it's a universal truth, because we can always find obstacles that keep our practice from growing. They'll always be available, but the point is to be resourceful enough to overcome them. The quote that I have is, "My practice is not limited by its opportunity, it's limited by its leader." I would write that down, and I would reference it. It goes back, the foundations of that were a book that I read, and I hope you've read as well, or I hope you do read it, called Extreme Ownership. There's a section on there that says, "There are no bad teams, only bad leaders." At the time when I read that, my team was to blame for everything. They weren't talented enough, they weren't dedicated enough, they weren't smart enough. I had to turn that around to really get the team and the culture that I want. But first, that had I had to swallow that bitter pill, which is everything is my fault. Next thing that I want to talk to you about is role modeling. Too many business owners, doctors are my people, so I usually reference them. They think a good leader is an authority figure, someone that's dictating, do this, do that. That's how I used to lead. That's how I was brought up through high-level athletics at the University of Nebraska as a trainer, through the U.S. Army. I saw a lot of that in dental school. And that is really ineffective leadership. It's partially effective because people know what they should do, but you get lots of resistance, lots of pushback. So the bottom line is to lead by example. One thing that I challenge my coaching clients and people that I speak to is write down what 3 things would you want from every single one of the team members on your payroll. What are 3 things? Let's see, for me, that would probably be high integrity. That would probably be compassionate. And that would be hungry, meaning they have a desire to learn and grow as time goes on. But then you have to look in the mirror and say, am I those 3 things? Am I representing the values and the behaviors of what I deem as important in my team? If not, then you will continue to struggle. It can be attention to detail in the practice. One of the things that can divide a culture is gossip, blame, drama, that sort of thing. But are you contributing to that? Are you talking different about patients when they're not in the chair as a relative to when you're eye to eye, face to face with them? Are you fueling that? Are you talking about one team member and when they're absent and there's another team member present, possibly your favorite team member? For leaders, it's always showtime. There are always eyes watching your patients, your team members, if you're a parent, your kids, and you have to be able to walk the talk. And the one thing that I see again and again in dentistry is that, and I suffered from as well, is I thought that my results were always a byproduct of hard work. So I thought to have more, I had to do more. But in essence, to have more, I had to be more. And that's really the value and purpose foundation that you define for yourself as a leader so that your team can emulate that. So make sure that your words match your action. Make sure that you have a code of conduct, lines that you won't cross and your team doesn't cross, that you're showing your team members how to take care of your patients. Are you charging for buildups that were never done? Are there ethical issues that you're presenting to your team? Those are the team members that will follow suit because you're giving them permission to bend the rules in ways that they shouldn't be bent. So really developing a leadership standard and a practice standard and sharing that with your team and realizing that it's always showtime and that they're watching you at all times and they'll do far more what they see from you than what you say or what you direct them to do. The third thing I want to talk to you about is really how do you keep your team accountable? So the first 2 steps are really about holding yourself to a high level of accountability. Make sure that you're keeping the power with you and not leaking power and blame and gossip and blaming the weather or the economy or October or whatever it is that we like to blame. There's always ways to overcome it if we just accept it, anticipate it, and are anti-fragile enough to overcome it. But once we've developed that as a leader, the next step is to make sure that the culture follows suit. And so I'm sharing a book here by Shannon Waller. I've taken my team through these 12 strategies. It's a really simple book, a really easy read. But the reason I like this book so much is that it creates an ownership mentality across the team. And that requires a level of trust from the owner, from the practice owner, from the dentist, to make sure that they know that you can trust them to take on things and that you're giving them things to own completely. Meaning that you might audit it from time to time, but man, I don't know much about insurance and I don't know much about sterilization. I have to trust that they're taking care of that. Yeah, I check on it from time to time, but it's not death by checklist. It's making sure that I've set the frame, that they understand the standard, and that they're upholding that standard. And once you've developed a culture of that, people hold one another accountable. For example, this year I had not one, but two not so good hires in my hygiene department. And within 2 weeks on each of them, the team was setting the standard for them. I heard conversations about essentially that's not how we do it around here. And then after a week or two of doing that, the team was coming to me and saying, like, I don't think they're a culture fit. And that warmed my heart because we had already set and established the standards. A lot of times I'll talk to coaching clients or people on strategy sessions, and they're frustrated that their team aren't doing this and that, but the team doesn't know the standard. So first of all, maybe the dentist doesn't know what they want the outcomes to be. And if you don't know what the outcomes that you want are, and you haven't shared it with their team, you can't expect them to hit targets they can't see. So what is your mission? Does your team know the mission? What is your vision? In my practice, everyone on the team knows that we really are trying to level up in 3 ways, every patient every day, and that's goodwill, case acceptance, and growth. We have some capacity problems now, so we can't just grow by adding more patient volume. So now we're growing by growing ourselves, our competencies and our confidence. But everyone knows those 3 things. Everyone knows our mission statement, and everyone knows our values because they've created the values. Each year we sit down and we go over the mission. We go over kind of an after action review. What are we proud of from the last year? What are our challenges, and what do we want to do better next year? And then within that framework, the team develops the values, and then each team member champions one specific value. Why is that powerful? Well, one of my favorite phrases in leadership is that if they build it, they back it. So if I give them an idea, I dictate the idea, the acceptance is low and the resistance is usually high, and the follow through is mediocre at best. So that's your baby because you created it. However, if they come up with the idea, they come up with the value, they come up with the system, they'll support that because it's their idea. And the worst thing to do as an owner is trying to improve upon the idea, because you may make the idea 10% better, but you've taken their investment in the idea and decreased it by 20, 30%. So what is the net result going to be there? Allow them to figure out how to tweak and master the system that they're building. Allow them to be the owner of their department or their operatory. In my practice, the hygienist owns the operatory, the equipment, the supplies. Is everything working? Does she have the resources that she needs? Does she have the training that she needs? All that is up to my team. And a lot of the concepts are really comprised in this book and put it in a common language. Let me give you an example. One chapter in the book talks about batteries included, meaning you don't come to the morning huddle looking to be pumped up by the office manager or the doctor. You come batteries included. There's no case of the Mondays or dragging your feet. We all show up to work. We all check our ego at the door. We all have a common vision. We're all going to be aligned. We're all going to collaborate. We're all going to support one another. That's batteries included. It doesn't matter if the hygienist has to clean up the assistant's room. That's what teams do. And it really gives them a thought process that allows them to think like you, the entrepreneur. And now that everyone on the team is thinking alike, you can get more done. What's another example from the book? Time and effort versus results. So as an hourly employee, they get paid more the longer they work, right? So they're almost disincentivized to be efficient. But as a practice owner, does it matter to your patient if you spent 3 hours on the crown or 30 minutes on the crown? Does it matter to your paycheck? Does it matter that you spent 3 hours on the crown and the crown fails? No, it doesn't matter. It's all results. And to get the team understanding that it's all about results and it's not about that we worked so hard, we tried so hard, we put so much time and effort into it. No, it's about results. And you can see that in a practice day. You've all had those days where you feel like you're running around like a chicken with your head cut off, and you look at the exec sheet at the end of the day and you've produced almost nothing. Meanwhile, you have days that are like, wow, that was just stress-free and seamless and everything flowed. And you look at that same sheet and it's triple the production. Getting them think on a results basis is a really important thing and part of the culture. The last thing that I would add here to make sure that team members are accountable is what I call meeting rhythm. Making sure that teams know that there's going to be a predictable standard, but there's going to be a conversation about that standard ongoing always. That can happen in your morning huddle, which you would have daily. That can happen with your one-on-one meetings with team members. With new team members, you might want to shorten it to every month. With more established team members, I don't do it any more than once a quarter. We're only in the office about 11 or 12 days a month, and if we did it every month, I'd feel like I was always scheduling these meetings. But it's super effective to have these check-ins. Then we have monthly meetings where we do an after-action review, similar to the annual meeting that I told you about, where we go over what went well, what didn't go so well, what are we going to do better next time. We do some training. I do some coaching. I think those are all important hats to wear as a leader. Dentists have a ton of hats, but the more confident you get in wearing the hats of the leader, the faster your team will grow. The faster that you'll develop a culture where people enjoy being around one another, that they hold one another accountable. And that's not always up to you as a dentist. And it just makes a great place to work. And team members want that too. We try not to often throw money at the problem, saying, well, they'd be more motivated if I gave them additional bonus. Not really. I think bonuses help motivated people, but in a culture thing, you have to find the right people. You have to give them a shared vision. You have to hold them accountable, and you have to create a culture that holds one another accountable. So the last thing that I would recommend is that once you have a firmly established mission, vision, values, each time you meet with them on a one-on-one, have them self-evaluate. Good team members will be really honest. And I never look at one of these self-evaluation sheets and say, the value is integrity. I never am surprised by the answer. They're usually self-critical enough that if they're struggling with something, they'll be candid about it. So I have them self-evaluate on the mission, the three things I told you about: growth, case acceptance, and goodwill. And then I ask them, would you like me to challenge you, or what would you like me to hold you accountable to in the next 90 days? That's part of growth. And I'll leave it at that. So that creates a standard of self-management that makes running a practice really easy and really fun. And if you're in a competitive market, it also gives the team member a sense that I can't get this anywhere else. I'm getting training, I'm getting support, I'm getting encouragement. I have a strong leader. I know what he wants. He does right by his patients, or she does right by his patients. He's developing a fantastic reputation in the community. He's mentoring me. All these things are hard to come by, and the right team members, you may not have them all right now, but you'll become a magnet. Word will get out that it's an incredible place for you to work, because people naturally resist this accountability and structure, but once you've defined it for them and given them some freedom to paint within the frame that you've created, they really come to enjoy it. The right people do, the self-starters do, and they like that autonomy. And we talked about some of the unique or not so unique purposes of growth, evolution, expansion, service. The other one that I would say is really common is freedom. And the more freedom and autonomy you give team members, the longer, the more loyal they'll be, because that's a really hard practice environment to be in. So those are some of the things I want to share with you today, specifically about accountability. But the more you own the issues in your practice, the more you'll look for being resourceful as opposed to more resources. Blame tends to ask for more resources, meaning I wish there was a better economy. I wish more patients needed my service. I wish the phone would ring. I wish there were better team members. That will all get you limited success. But taking the accountability, taking it upon yourself, swallowing that bitter pill that is everything is my fault, will get you further, faster than pointing the finger. So I encourage you to point the thumb. I encourage you to really be a strong role model for your team. And I encourage you to find a framework that easily allows you to hold them accountable, allows them to hold you accountable, and allows team members to hold one another accountable. And they can't do that unless they know the standard. So Thank you so much for joining me today. The next time we meet will actually not be the second Friday of next month. It'll be December 21st, and we'll go into clarity, which is one of my favorites, particularly because too often dentists don't know what they want. But if you get really clear on what you want your outcomes to be, and they're not set on a standard of someone else, the guy next door, because he has a faster car or a bigger vacation or takes more time off, if it resonates with you, then you can pursue that without reluctance. You can pursue that like a man or woman possessed. And that's when things really get fun, when you know what your targets are and you can share that vision with your team and they support you. So I look forward to talking to you again in December for one of these sessions. I would invite you to share any feedback you have at the link below. Again, this will be recorded, and we'll figure out how to get this out to many more of you. And these sessions will continue, these episodes will continue clear through May. And then we may even go further if there's demand for it. But I appreciate you sharing some of your Friday with me. I think Fridays are where people can separate themselves from the pack, because there's many dentists that aren't willing to invest in themselves and do what needs to be done. And there's a lot of dentists who aren't open-minded enough to realize that these things are the true drivers of true success. Chasing more money, chasing bigger practices and more practices without a compelling why leads to a place of frustration. And that's not where I want to see any of my colleagues. So I'm happy to support you. If you have any specific questions for me that you want to ask me privately, you can always reach out to me at dr.dave@relentlessdentist.com. And once again, I want to thank our sponsor, Equa Marketing, Naren, Haley, Christan, who spent lots of time setting this all up. And I look forward to sharing with you again next month.